There is a presence that exists not in the shadows, but in the plain sight of a crowded room. Self, carefully constructed, moves through the world with a quiet grace, a competent smile. Well-rehearsed opinion, it is a performance of such fidelity that it almost feels real, but beneath the surface of this composed life, a different truth hums, a low-frequency tremor in the soul. It is the fear not of darkness, but of light, not of being invisible, but of being truly, fully seen, to be witnessed without the filter of the persona is to risk a kind of dissolution. This is the silent terror of exposure, the quiet ache of the authentic self, holding its breath in a world that seems to demand a constant, flawless broadcast. It begins not with a decision, but with an instinct, a deep, primal understanding that to be entirely naked in the world is to be vulnerable. And so the hands get to work, not the physical hands, but the quiet, observant self within, the architect of the persona. The first bricks are laid early. They are not made of stone, but of mirrored glances and reflected tones of voice. A child offers a drawing, a burst of chaotic color and imagination. The response is not a celebration of the wildness, but a gentle correction. What a nice straight house. The child learns the wild, untamed lines of their inner world are less desirable than the straight, predictable ones. Another brick is placed. A tear is met with impatience, a flicker of anger met with alarm, a moment of shyness labeled as weakness. Each reaction is a lesson, each lesson is a brick, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, a wall begins to form. It is not meant to be cruel, it is a fortress for a spirit that has learned in some small way that its raw form is not entirely safe. This is the birth of the curated self. It is an act of love in its own strange way, a love for connection, for belonging, for survival. This self learns to speak in the right tones, to offer the expected answers. It learns which enthusiasms to temper, which questions to swallow, which parts of its own heart to politely ignore. It becomes proficient in the local language of approval. It masters the geography of its social landscape, navigating away from the swamps of awkwardness and toward the solid ground of being liked, of being accepted. This persona is not a lie, not exactly. It is a highlight reel, a carefully edited version where the messy, complex, and unresolved chapters have been neatly omitted. There is a profound intelligence in this construction. It is a psychological masterpiece of adaptation. The self observes the world like a brilliant, silent strategist. It notes that vulnerability can be met with dismissal, that too much intensity can cause others to step back, that neediness is often a burden, and so it designs a solution. It becomes fiercely independent so as not to be a bother. It becomes endlessly agreeable to avoid conflict. It becomes the listener, the helper, the strong one, roles that are praised, roles that are safe, roles that keep the focus shining brightly on the acceptable facade and safely away from the trembling interior. For a time it works, the architecture holds, the self moves through the world with it newfound ease. It receives the rewards of its own construction, smiles, inclusion, a sense of fitting in, but the cost of any fortress is the view from within, from inside the walls. The world is seen through narrow windows, the light is filtered, the authentic self, the one that built the walls, now lives in their shadow. It watches the curated self move through life, receiving accolades meant for a stranger. A quiet loneliness begins to grow, not from a lack of people, but from the presence of a person who is not truly oneself. The very structure designed for connection becomes the primary obstacle to it. The self is both the architect and the prisoner, the builder and the ghost in the machine, watching a life unfold from behind a one-way mirror. It is rarely a single catastrophic event. The foundation of this fear is not laid by thunderclap, but by 1,000 subtle rains. The original wound is not a scar you can point to, but a fossil, an impression left in the soft sediment of a developing self. It is the memory of a feeling long after the specific facts have faded. Consider the quiet moments that echo for a lifetime. A child bursting with the urgent cosmic news of a captured ladybug is met with a distracted nod from a parent lost in their own worries. The child does not process this as the adult's preoccupation. They process it as the ladybug's insignificance and, by extension, their own. another moment. A carefully written poem, a secret world of feeling offered up like a sacred object, is met with a well-intentioned correction of its spelling. The message, however unintended, is seared into the psyche. The form is more important than the failing. The container is more valuable than its contents. These are the microfractures, the small, almost invisible cracks in the sense of being wholly acceptable. They are the dismissive chuckle when a boy cries, teaching him that tenderness is shameful. They are the exasperated sigh when a girl asks too many questions, teaching her that her curiosity is a burden. They are the way of family. Culture, a classroom, rewards certain traits and politely ignores others. The self, in its brilliant adaptability, begins to create a map. Here be dragons of disapproval, here lie the calm seas of acceptance, and the truest, most vibrant parts of the self, the messy. The loud, the quiet, the weird, the deeply feeling, are often charted in the dangerous territories. Sometimes the wound is woven from the fabric of absence, the things that were never mirrored back, a child's unique way of thinking, their peculiar sense of humor, their deep sensitivity to sound or light. These things simply go unnoticed, unseen. There is no one to reflect this unique self back to them to validate its existence. So the child assumes this core part of them must not be real or must not be good. They learn to hide it, not because it was ever punished, but because it was never truly seen. It becomes a secret, and secrets by their nature foster a sense of shame. The wound then is a lesson in conditional belonging. It is the dawning awareness that love, attention, and safety are not boundless. They are currencies exchanged for the right behavior, the right performance. The authentic self in its raw and unedited form is deemed too risky. It might be too much, it might not be enough. And so the child makes the only logical choice for survival. They learn to hold their breath around certain topics. They learn to smile when they want to scream. They learn to perform a version of themselves that earns the light, while the rest retreats into the private, unlit interior. The original wound is not the pain of being hurt. It is the profound, soul-level decision that to be seen is to be at risk of being unloved. Beneath the architecture of the mind, beneath the stories and the memories, lies an older, more ancient system. It is a biological fortress, wired for a world of tangible threats. Its command center is a small, almond-shaped cluster of neurons. The amygdala, this is the body's sentinel, and its only language is survival. It does not understand poetry or nuance. It understands threat and safety, and for the self that fears being seen, the social world has been mistakenly categorized as a permanent, low-grade threat zone. When the curated self is in charge, the system is calm. It is a well-defended castle with the drawbridge down, but the guards are vigilant. But the moment the authentic self stirs, the moment a true thought threatens to escape, or a genuine emotion rises to the surface, the sentinel sounds the alarm. It is a visceral, preconscious reaction. The hypothalamus activates, the pituitary gland signals the adrenals, a cascade of cortisol. And adrenaline floods the bloodstream. The heart rate quickens, not with excitement, but with preparation for flight. The palms may dampen, the breath may become shallow. This is the body mobilizing for an emergency. The emergency is visibility. This is the cruel physiological joke. The very system designed to protect from physical harm is now being activated by the prospect of a conversation, by the risk of offering a real opinion, by the simple act of walking into a room full of people. The brain, in its brilliant but often clumsy adaptability, has learned to associate exposure with danger. Disapproving glance is processed with the same primal intensity as a predator's snarl. The possibility of social rejection is framed as a life or death scenario. The body does not know the difference, it only knows the chemistry of fear. This is not a conscious choice. It is a neural pathway worn deep as a canyon riverbed. From a lifetime of use, every time a risk was taken and met with a negative outcome, or even the perceived possibility of a negative outcome, that pathway was reinforced. Connection between being seen and experiencing pain became a superhighway. Now the sentinel stands guard at the entrance to this highway, ready to slam the gates. Shut at the first sign of traffic. It is the tightness in the chest before speaking up. It is the sudden mental fog when asked a personal question. It is the impulse to make oneself smaller, quieter, less noticeable. The sentinel's strategies are the classic quartet: fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. Fight might manifest as defensiveness, a preemptive strike to push others away before they can get close enough to see the real you. Flight is the art of avoidance, of leaving the party early, of deflecting questions, of staying in the shallow end of human interaction. Freeze is that moment of deer-in-the-headlights paralysis when genuine connection is offered. The mind going blank, the self retreating into a protective stillness. And fawn is perhaps the most socially elegant of the defenses, the immediate compliance, the people pleasing, the mirroring of others to ensure they remain pleased and therefore non-threatening. All are brilliant, automatic adaptations designed by a nervous system that believes it is keeping its host alive. The tragedy is that the host is now a prisoner, guarded by a protector who mistakes love for danger and authenticity for a threat to its very existence. A life curated for safety becomes a life lived in a gilded cage. The performance, once a tool for survival, hardens into an identity. It is a suit of armor worn so long it feels like skin. From the outside, it may look like competence, like charm, like unshakable strength, but from the inside, it is a constant, low hum of exhaustion. The energy required to maintain the facade is a tax levied on the soul, draining the very resources needed for genuine living. There is a profound loneliness that accompanies this performance. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people who are connecting with a character you invented. Laughter shared, the confidences exchanged, the bonds formed, they all belong to the curated self. The authentic self watches these interactions from a great distance, like in exile watching the celebrations of a homeland they can no longer return to. They receive love, but it is a letter addressed to someone else. They achieve success, but it is a medal pinned on a uniform they never wanted to wear. This is the central paradox. The very walls built to facilitate connection become the very things that make it impossible. Self is both the warden and the inmate, holding the key to its own cell but terrified of the world outside the door. The performance demands constant vigilance. Every conversation is a potential minefield requiring pre-scripted responses and calculated reactions. A simple question, like "How are you?" is not an invitation for truth, but a trigger for a rapid internal scan. Which version of fine is most appropriate here? Which anecdote will be most entertaining, most relatable, most safe? The mind becomes a stage manager, frantically working behind the curtain, adjusting the lights, cueing the actor, while the performance goes on out front. This internal split is depleting. It leaves little room for spontaneity, for the unexpected joy that comes from being caught off guard by life. Every moment is managed, every outcome anticipated. It is a life of rehearsal without ever experiencing the opening night. And then there is the fear of the glitch, the terror that one day the mask will slip. That moment of genuine grief will crack the veneer of strength, that a flash of real anger will shatter the image of endless agreeability, that a need for help will betray the performance of total independence. This fear creates a life of relentless control. Emotions are throttled back, opinions are sanded down, desires are muted. The world is experienced through a filter, and the filter's primary function is to eliminate risk. But in eliminating the risk of exposure, it also eliminates the possibility of raw joy, of deep sorrow, of the full, messy, and magnificent spectrum of human feeling. The prison of performance is ultimately a quarantine of the heart, protecting it from a sickness that is also its only cure. No structure, no matter how masterfully built, is impervious to time and pressure. The facade, for all its polished strength, is no different. The turning point is rarely a grand cinematic collapse. It is a subtle fracture, a quiet internal sigh that becomes a fissure. It is the moment the performance, for just a second, fails, a glitch in the system, a crack through which the light, for the first time, begins to stream in. This glitch often wears the guise of exhaustion. It is the simple, profound fatigue of holding a weight that was never meant to be carried indefinitely. One morning, the act of constructing the smile, of summoning the expected enthusiasm, feels not just difficult but impossible. The energy account is empty. The will has gone on strike. Systems failure born not of breakdown, but of a deep biological truth. The soul can only endure its own confinement for so long. The body rebels with a headache, a lingering lethargy, a quiet refusal to participate in its own imprisonment. It is the self in its oldest wisdom finally saying enough. Sometimes the glitch is triggered by an unexpected moment of kindness that disarms the entire defense system. It is not a praise for the performance, but a gentle acknowledgement of the performer's fatigue, a simple, perceptive question from another. You don't always have to be so strong, you know. The words land not as sound, but as a key turning in a long-locked door. It is the shock of being seen not for the strength one projects, but for the effort it takes to project it. This kind of empathy does not attack the walls, it simply reminds the one inside them that they are not forgotten. Or it can be a surge of authentic emotion, so powerful it breaches the containment wall. A sudden, unbidden wave of grief for a loss never properly mourned, a spark of pure, uncalculated joy at the sight of a sunset, a righteous anger that finally, after years of being politely swallowed, refuses to be silenced. In that unscripted moment, the curated self is momentarily bypassed. The real self speaks or cries or laughs. Breathtaking, terrifying second, there is no sentinel, no warden, no performance. There is only the raw, unfiltered truth of a human being, and the world does not end. Silence that follows is not one of judgment, but of reality. The glitch reveals a terrifying and liberating truth. The prison door was never locked from the outside. It was only ever held shut from within by the fear of what lay on the other side. Healing is not the demolition of the walls. It is the conscious, gentle act of learning to live with the doors open. It is not about becoming someone new, but about becoming the someone you were never meant to be. The journey from fear to freedom is not a grand arrival at a finished state, but a slow, tender migration toward the unfinished, the imperfect, the authentic. It begins with a single, quiet decision to stop editing the manuscript of the self. This courage is not a roaring fire, but a pilot light. It is the small, persistent flame of willingness, the willingness to let a silence hang in a conversation without rushing to fill it with pleasantries, the willingness to state a simple preference for a film, for a meal, for a way of spending an afternoon without first gauging the preferences of everyone else in the room. It is the practice of allowing a no to exist where a performative yes once lived. These are not grand gestures of rebellion, but quiet acts of sovereignty. They are the first tentative steps out of the fortress, not to burn it down, but to simply stand in the field beyond its shadow, feeling the sun and the wind directly on the skin. Integration is the process of making the interior exterior in small, manageable doses. It is the conscious selection of a safe harbor, a trusted friend, a therapist, a journal. Patch of quiet woods where the uncurated self can be let off its leash. In this space, one can practice speaking the unspeakable thought, admitting the shameful fear, or expressing the dormant desire. The goal is not a cathartic purge, but a gentle acclimatization. It is teaching the nervous system, breath by breath, that this exposure is not a threat to survival, but its very prerequisite. The sentinel learns a new language, one that can distinguish between a social slight and a mortal danger. There is a profound reframing that must occur. The traits once hidden away, the sensitivity, the intensity, the quietness, the peculiarities, are not flaws to be eradicated, but the very signature of a soul. What was once labeled as too much is reclaimed as a capacity for deep feeling. What was dismissed as not enough is understood as a different, valuable rhythm of being. The self begins to approach its own depths, not with a critical eye, but with the curiosity of an archivist discovering a lost civilization. It is the realization that the very parts deemed unworthy of the light were, in fact, the treasures all along. And so a new architecture begins to form, not a fortress, but a home with open windows. The doors are on hinges, allowing the self to choose when to be in the world and when to retreat for rest. The curated self does not vanish, its energy is simply repurposed. It becomes a helpful ambassador, a social facilitator, rather than a tyrannical gatekeeper. The ultimate peace is found in the acceptance of the unfinished nature of it. There is no final draft of a human being. There is only the ongoing, courageous act of showing up day after day as the work in progress that you are. To be seen is not to be flawless, it is to be present. It is to let the light at long last fall upon the real, the messy, the beautifully incomplete masterpiece of you.